The flowing that gets reduced. So this is basically characterized by an upper airway collapse. So normal breathing here is obstructed because we have a soft tissue that will block the flow of oxygen overall. Now this disease or this sort of syndrome will cause a number of issues later on. Before we actually even talk about those syndrome or those diseases that it will cause, we have to actually diagnose it. Right? So different patients will have different degrees at which this obstruction will happen, and that's what Dr. Sanjeev talked about, the index, the AHI index. So what does a polysomnography plot generally look like? So polysomnography in its word is polysomnus. It's a Latino-Greek word which means multiple channels. So that's what it has in its name itself, and it's measuring brain waves, it's measuring oxygen levels, it's measuring the respiratory effort, the nasal airflow, and the amount of oxygen that's flowing in, whether or not you're snoring, and whether or not your limbs are moving. That's overall a big picture of what this instrument tries to measure. And this is what you're seeing on the left, right? So there are different sort of channels that is being hooked onto the patient. The patient comes to the clinic, spends a night there, there's a technician spending time with that particular patient. And what is being recorded for around 8 to 9 hours are these kind of signals, right? So these are like repeated patterns that you see here. From what you will see in this figure is like these are all sorts of these sine curves that are being repeated overall. What is OSA or what is obstructive sleep apnea is characterized by certain kind of patterns, right? So it's a pattern matching problem in that sense, and that pattern is of apnea and hypoapnea, which again Dr. Sanjeev talked about, which is characterized by this long pause where you don't see any airflow. It's further characterized by certain drop in oxygen. This is when you have hypoapnea. And how this is quantified is in the form of the apnea-hypoapnea index, which is basically the number of apnea and hypoapnea events that you're seeing per hour of your sleep cycle. So the bigger the number is, the scarier that number is in some sense, or Dr. Sanjeev already talked about it. You can focus on three, or this is, at this point, this is a score which gives you 4 classes of patients. One is normal, so if you have less than 5, you're a normal person. If you have this number between 5 and 15, you're mild, between 15 and 30, it's moderate, and beyond that, it's severe. Now, you can think about this being a pattern matching problem, right? So like in terms of, if I go back and like show you the slide, finding out these patterns should not be really difficult, right? But what is happening is this cycle is something which is happening over an 8-hour cycle, and the instrument which helps capture this sort of signal right now is not fully automated in that fashion. So it will give you some sense of where these apnea and hypoapnea events happen, but it doesn't really tell you exactly what at which stages, how confident it is that it is actually an apneic event and so on. So in terms of what is the analytical problem is the technician, once they get these 8-hour scan, the next day they will spend around 4 hours just going through that scan manually and figuring out whether whatever the apnea or the hypoapnea events the instrument flag, are these real or not. And that's where the verification of the AHI index that is generated happens. Now you can imagine that if you have this kind of a screen, like going through an 8-hour scan will take a long time, and that's why it takes 4 hours. But I told you that this is a pattern matching problem, so it should be solvable, right? You can look for very specific patterns, and rather than having to scan through the entire sequence, you could just focus on areas where there is either apnea or there is apnea or hypoapnea. So in terms of the questions that we are asking, what analytical questions that we are asking is, what are the most informative channels? So one of the data sets that we got from Dr. Sanjeev's lab, this is from Sleepware, it's a commercial Philips-based machine. It measures 32 different channels, right? What we know about sleep apnea is only few of these are actually really important. So the idea behind, once you get this kind of data, is to figure out what is those channels which are really important for giving a particular class of patients a particular label, which is normal, severe, or mild or moderate. Can the manual reporting step, which is right now the time-consuming step, can this be made more efficient by use of AI or ML methods? And can this technological solution, so we keep talking as academicians, keep talking about developing solutions, but at the end, something has to go to the lab, it has to sit on the computer that's right now sitting at Ames, right? So if we talk about any solution that we're going to develop, is it something which is going to be ready and deployable at that particular end? That's something which we have to keep in mind. And one of the things that we often ignore is that we are also measuring other clinical covariates. So a particular patient who walks into the clinic will also have other covariates, including their body mass index, their waist size, and there are other factors that are being measured. How can this inform the AI or the ML model in a much better fashion? So what is my wish list for seeing an ideal OSA test? So an ideal OSA test should be frugal. We should not be measuring, or we should not be asking the user to have multiple different channels hooked onto their different parts of the body. We should have a summarized view available for the technician. So the first point is more from a patient's point of view, and the second point is more from the user point of view, which is the technician should be able to figure out what is this class of this particular patient just by looking at a summary profile. And finally, these models should be easy to run, easy to deploy on a typical lab computer, and the model, whatever that model is, it should be interpretable. So there are potential gaps, or whatever the wish list I created, there are potential gaps that the AI can help. So I told you that this is a pattern matching problem, and obviously I'm not the first one to think about it. There have been companies and there have been methods that have already been thinking about this problem at large. So you can think of this problem as a problem where you have millions of data points coming from different channels, and the idea is, can you flag those points where certain events are happening, and can you use machine learning to sort of detect that? And that's what people have done. So there are two sort of classes of methods that people have tried to look at it. One class of methods focuses on demographic or anthropometric sort of metrics to find out whether you can predict the AHI index, which is the apnea hypoapnea index. So this is one class of methods where you're sort of looking at without or independent of the channel. And then there is a second class of approach where people have started to think about the frugal approach, whereas you have a machine, but rather than measuring all different channels, let's just focus on one channel. So this paper that came out last year talked about just measuring the oximetry channel to predict the different classes of patients. But does it really work? Right? So I was very happy to see that, okay, there is someone who's really thinking about what a particular problem that we should be focusing on and just focus on one particular channel. But if you actually go and read the fine print of this detail, I think something that Dr. Agarwal in his talk highlighted is it doesn't really work across patients, right? So this was trained on data from US and Chinese patients, and it works very well. So once you train it, it works. But now once you have a new category of patients coming from Africa, the oximetry channel just falls apart. It just doesn't work. So we have to be careful about developing any sort of solution that it is something which is going to be a function. Unless we crack this problem at the mechanistic level, it won't be something that will apply to all different classes of all different races at once. So what should be a workflow for an ideal OSA test, right? So this is something which we have been thinking about with Dr. Sanjeev's lab because of the data that has been generated in his lab for a while. And the way we have been doing this is by just looking at this data from very first principles approach, right? So one of the ideas that happen in machine learning is you have tons of data, let the machine figure out what exactly is happening, and it will tell you what exactly is happening. We take a slightly different approach. It's on the same lines, but we try to think it from very first principles. So the first thing that we notice in any data is there are outliers, and we don't like outliers. So we kind of get rid of these outliers in this approach by just pre-processing it, normalizing it, and so on. The second step that we do is we have multiple different channels, right? And not all of these channels are really, really important. But we do have information about what do the average value of these channels look like across different categories of patients. We can use that idea to figure out what are the important channels that help us sort of characterize one class of patients versus the other class. And what this represents will become clear in just the next plot that I'm going to show you. So rather than letting the machine learning part figure out whichever is the important channel, we do some sort of feature engineering in some fashion before it actually is fed to the machine, basically driven by what the data tells us. Okay, what does it look like? Fine. So in terms of, there is this idea that the first thing that we did once we looked at this kind of data, this is very, very preliminary, is there enough signal in the data in just few of the channels? I'm not showing you the name of those channels, but there is information in this data is even if you take these average values across these 8 hours, you can separate out the severe cases from the mild and the moderate and the normal cases, which means that there is enough signal in just a couple of channels which helps you separate out these cases. So the reason we have been thinking about this from this point is, do we really require the sophistication of a neural network to sort of figure these things out, something which is you can otherwise figure out in the linear fashion. And the fourth thing we have been thinking about is interpretability. So this is not my law, this is taken from a paper. But once we figure out what is the important time points, the model should be interpretable. It should be able to tell us why did it think a particular patient was normal or a severe case of a particular, or had a particular AHI value. Okay, so I'll end it here by summarizing that the polysomnography test is a gold standard test. We have to think about what exactly are we measuring, which are these important channels. And with Dr. Anurag, we had a discussion, and he pointed out that we can think of it from a different point of view, which is that you can think of this from a technological endpoint, where rather than measuring or having this instrument measure everything, you can probably have things measured from your watch, something like a watch that I'm currently wearing. Whatever method we talk about should try to reduce different loads. It should reduce the channel load. So if I have a machine like this, it reduces my channel to just one. It should reduce the cognitive load for the technician. It should reduce the diagnosis time, and the ideal solution will be interpretable, that will be easily deployable and fruitful. So I'll end it here, and thank you so much for attention. Just one last slide, which is totally independent of this talk. But since I talked about sleep, I thought I should talk about waking up. So there's a song, right, which is "Wake Me Up When September Ends," and this is September. What this particular plot is showing you is the number of births that happen in India, and there's a clear divide in the number of births that happen in the first half versus the second half. So I was just curious why this happens. And the reason this happens, if you look across different states, is the number of conceptions that happen in a particular month is a function of the different temperature. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out since we are in that month, and I'll end it here officially. Thank you.